You won't survive, the alien princess said, never realizing he was death itself. The bullet hit the wall 3 inches from Cole Hargrove's head, and he did not flinch. That was the first thing Princess Vela of the Sorvathi Empire noticed about the human soldier. Not the blood running from the cut on his jaw, not the way he held his rifle like it was an extension of his own arm, not even the pile of unconscious Sorvathi guards around his boots. It was the stillness in him when death came close. He simply turned his gray eyes toward the sound, measured the angle of the shot, and moved 2 steps to the left before the second bullet came. She had been watching from the cell window for 40 seconds when he found her. He did not speak. He broke the lock with something small and metal from his vest, pushed the door open, and looked at her the way a man looks at a package he has been sent to retrieve. Not rude, not warm, just certain. "You're Hargrove," she said in Sorvathi-accented English, which she had learned from data files. Her people had studied human languages for 6 years in preparation for contact, and she had been the best student in the royal program. "Move," he said. She moved. That was 2 hours ago. Now they were deep inside the ventilation tunnels of Sorvath Station 12, and Cole Hargrove had not spoken more than 11 words total. She had counted. Vela was not used to silence. She was a princess of the Third House, daughter of Emperor Drave, educated in 17 diplomatic languages, and trained from birth to fill every room she entered with the weight of her presence. Silence was something she used as a weapon, not something others used against her. Yet here she was, crawling through a metal tube behind a human male who breathed like he was sleeping, while her heart hammered loud enough that she was sure the guards outside could hear it. He stopped without warning, and she nearly put her face into his boot. "Patrol," he said, holding up one finger. She pressed flat and waited. Through the grate below, she could hear the slow, deliberate footsteps of a Sorvathi security officer. Standard patrol rhythm. 8 steps, pause, 8 steps, pause. She knew that rhythm because she had approved it herself for Station 12, when she had designed the security rotation 3 years ago. Cole did not wait for the footsteps to pass. He counted 4 of the 8 steps, then kept moving. He knew the blind spot in the pattern. She had no idea how. She had read the briefing her father's intelligence officers had assembled on human soldiers after the Cathara incident, when a team of 12 humans had held an entire Sorvathi border outpost against 400 soldiers for 9 days. The briefing said humans were adaptable. It said they learned fast under pressure. It said they had an unusual relationship with pain and survival that Sorvathi scientists did not fully understand. What the briefing had not said was that some of them moved through danger the way water moves through stone, not around it, through it. She studied the back of Cole's head as they crawled. He had dark hair cut short, a scar running from his left ear to the base of his neck, and a tattoo on the back of his right hand that she could not quite read in the dark. He was not the largest human she had seen in intelligence files. He was not the youngest. He was somewhere in his middle years, with the kind of face that would look exactly the same at 20 and at 50, a face that did not record time. They reached a junction and he paused, pulling a small device from his front pocket. He studied it for 4 seconds and then put it away. "Door at the end," he said. "Ship's there." "My father's forces will be waiting at the dock," she said. "We planned for capture as a political strategy. I was not supposed to actually escape." He looked at her for the first time since they had entered the tunnels. His eyes were a shade of gray that she did not have a word for in Sorvathi, and they were completely calm. "Plan for capture," he repeated. It was a diplomatic provocation. The Sorvathi Human Accord has a clause regarding the protection of royalty in neutral zones. My father intended to use my detention as grounds for renegotiating the mining rights in the Kel sector. Cole was quiet for a long moment. "Then you want to go back?" "I want to explain the situation so that you understand the strategic complexity of." "Do you want to go back?" he said again. Not a question this time, just words waiting for an answer. Vela hesitated, and in that hesitation something honest slipped through. "No," she said, "I do not." He nodded once and kept moving. She found herself following him without deciding to, which was strange. Vela of the third house did not follow anyone. She led, or she stood still, or she redirected the path so subtly that others thought they were still going where they chose. She had been doing it since she was 9 years old, and she was quite good at it. But there was something about Cole Hargrove that made following feel like the correct choice, the way stepping onto solid ground feels correct after a long time on ice. She did not like that feeling. She filed it away to examine later. They reached the door. He held up a fist and she stopped. He pressed his back to the wall beside the door frame, drew something from his side and waited. She counted her own heartbeats. 1, 2, 3, 4. The door opened from the outside. What happened next took less than 2 seconds, and she saw all of it, and she still was not entirely sure she had seen it correctly. The guard who came through the door was large, Sorvathi Special Forces, trained for 12 years, and Cole moved through him like he was made of smoke, redirecting the weapon, placing the guard against the wall in a hold she did not recognize, and pressing something against the guard's neck that put him down before he could make a sound. Cole stepped over the guard and held the door for her. She walked through and told herself her hands were not shaking. The dock was ahead. The ship was there, small and dark and shaped like nothing she had ever seen up close, and her father's forces were there too, exactly as she had predicted. 12 soldiers in a perimeter, officers with communication devices, a Sorvathi battlecruiser visible through the dock's observation window hovering just outside. "They will shoot us," she said. "They'll try," he said. He said it without arrogance, without pride, the way someone states the weather. And for the first time in her life, Vela believed completely in a sentence she had not spoken herself. "You won't survive this," she said. It came out softer than she intended, almost like a warning from someone who did not want to be right. He glanced at her sideways. Something moved in his expression that was not quite a smile and not quite something else. Then he looked back at the dock, at the 12 soldiers, at the battle cruiser outside, and he exhaled slowly through his nose. "Let's go," he said. She went. The first soldier saw them at 40 meters and raised his weapon before he finished turning around. Cole was already moving left, using the shipping container at the dock's edge as cover, and Vela's instinct followed his body like it had decided before she did. She pressed herself behind the metal wall of the container, heard the shot ring off steel somewhere above her, and felt the deck vibrate under her feet as Cole moved again. She could not see him from her position. That was the terrifying part. She could hear the sounds of the engagement, short and precise, nothing like the broad chaos of military battles she had studied. There was no shouting, no prolonged exchange. Just individual moments of contact, each one quick and complete, like a period at the end of a sentence. 40 seconds after it began, Cole Hargrove was standing beside her again. 9 of the 12 soldiers were no longer standing. The other 3 had backed toward the battle cruiser's connection dock, and one of them was on a communication device calling for reinforcements. Cole reached past her, keyed a code into the panel on the ship's exterior, and the ramp lowered. "Board," he said. She boarded. The ship was small inside, 2 seats at the front, a narrow passage behind, and the kind of stripped-down practical design that told her everything had been removed that did not serve a direct function. No decoration, no comfort beyond necessity. The seat she lowered herself into adjusted to her shape, which she had not expected from a human vessel. Cole was in the front seat before she finished settling. His hands moved across the controls with the same quality of movement as everything else he did, no wasted motion, no hesitation, like the ship was a language he had spoken since childhood. The ramp closed. The dock outside lit up with soldiers, real numbers now, not 12 but closer to 40, and the battle cruiser was adjusting its position to block the exit corridor. "They will close the corridor in approximately 90 seconds, she said, reading the movement pattern of the cruiser through the ship's forward display. Our thruster output cannot outrun a Sorvathi battlecruiser at this range. Not trying to outrun it, he said. She looked at him. Then what are you trying to do? He did not answer. He brought the ship up off the dock, angled it in a direction that made no navigational sense to her, and pushed forward at a speed that pressed her back into the seat. The battlecruiser's guns turned toward them. Then Cole did something with the controls that she had never seen a pilot do. He did not evade. He flew directly at the battlecruiser, at the section between its two forward gun arrays, the narrow geometric gap where neither cannon could track without risking the hull of the other. The gap was 40 meters wide. Their ship was 37. She closed her eyes. She did not mean to. It was the first involuntary thing her body had done since she was a child. When she opened them, they were through. The battlecruiser could not turn fast enough to follow without striking the station dock, and the pilots aboard would know it. They would have to pull back, circle, recalculate. It would take them 6 minutes minimum. Cole had known that. He had known the gap, the timing, the gun arc, the reaction time of Sorvathi cruiser pilots. He had known all of it before he flew at the ship. How? She said. It was not a full question, but he seemed to understand it. Flew against Sorvathi formations in the Kell border engagement, he said. 3 times. Learned the patterns. The Kell border engagement. She knew that name 3 years ago. Humans had repelled a Sorvathi expansion attempt at the outer mineral belt, a conflict that her father's advisors had described as a minor setback. She had read the official reports. The official reports had not mentioned that any human pilot had survived repeated contact with Sorvathi cruiser formations. The survival rate for that kind of engagement, according to every military study she had ever read, was under 4%. She looked at Cole Hargrove and felt something shift behind her sternum, something she could not immediately name. Not admiration, exactly. Something older and more careful than admiration. "What is your rank?" she said. "I left the military." "What was your rank when you left?" A pause. "Sergeant." "And before this mission, what were you doing?" He was quiet for long enough that she thought he would not answer. Then, "Farming." She blinked. "Farming." "Wheat," he said. "Outside a town in Colorado. I had about 12 acres going when the call came." The absurdity of it moved through her like a cold current. The man who had just piloted a 37-meter ship through a 40-meter gap in a battle cruiser's gun array, who had cleared 9 trained soldiers in under a minute, who had walked through her station's security rotation like he had designed it himself, had been growing wheat in Colorado. "Why did you come back?" she said. "For this mission." He did not answer right away. The stars stretched ahead through the display, the corridor behind them now clear, the cruiser visible as a distant shape recalculating its pursuit vector. "They asked," he said finally. 3 words. She turned them over carefully, looking for more inside them, and found exactly as much as he had put there. She looked at her own hands in her lap. Fine bone, the color of deep amber wood, the nails still perfect despite everything, because Sorvathi biology did not yield to stress the same way. She had been raised to believe that human beings were a young species, emotional, reactive, impressive in their creativity but limited in their depth, an interesting case study in rapid development, as her tutors had called them. Her tutors had never met Cole Hargrove. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Human space. Station called Aldrich Point. It's a neutral processing facility. You'll be handed to diplomatic personnel there, and the Accord protocols take over." "And you?" "Back to Colorado," he said. The stars continued ahead. The pursuit vector of the cruiser was still visible on the display, but it was falling further behind, and Vela realized the Sorvathi pilots had made a decision not to push the engagement into open space without authorization. She should have felt relief. She felt, instead, a peculiar form of attention, Like something in the room was worth watching very carefully, and she had only just realized it. "Cole," she said. He looked at her briefly over his shoulder. "How many missions like this have you done?" He faced forward again, the silence stretched. "Enough," he said. She filed that away too, next to the other things she was planning to examine later, when she had time and distance, and the composure to be the princess again, instead of the woman sitting in a human ship wondering why she felt safer than she had in 3 years. Outside, the stars were cold and exact, and Cole Hargrove flew through them like he had always been part of that dark. Aldrich Point appeared on the display 6 hours later, a structure that looked nothing like Sorvathi engineering. Where Sorvathi design favored organic curves and tiered architecture that mimicked the layered geography of their home world, this station was angular and direct, built for function with an almost aggressive disregard for beauty. Vela found herself respecting it despite herself. Cole had said perhaps 40 words during the journey. She had spent most of it reading the mission briefing materials she found loaded into the ship's secondary display, documents about the diplomatic situation, the Kel sector negotiations, the political mechanics behind her father's plan to use her capture. She read them with the practiced speed of someone who had grown up consuming intelligence briefings before breakfast. What she found troubled her more than the Sorvathi soldiers on the dock had. "Cole," she said, as Aldrich Point grew larger in the display. "What?" "The briefing materials on this ship. They reference a contact inside the Sorvathi diplomatic corps who provided your team with the station layout and my detention location." She paused. "The level of detail in the layout is extraordinary. Security rotation timing, guard shift overlaps, the maintenance access points you used. This information did not come from standard intelligence work." He said nothing. "The only person who would have that level of detail," she said carefully, "is the person who designed the security rotation." Still nothing. "I designed the security rotation for Station 12, she said, 3 years ago." Silence. "I did not provide that information to anyone," she said. "I know," he said. She waited. He exhaled slowly. "The information came from someone in your father's inner circle, someone who wanted you out of that station regardless of the diplomatic plan." The words settled into her like stones into water. "Someone in my father's inner circle," she said. The mission wasn't just diplomatic recovery. There was a secondary concern. Intel suggested the detention wasn't entirely your father's idea. The original plan, your father's plan, was for capture and political leverage, like you said. But someone else moved the timeline. Someone who wanted you held longer, possibly indefinitely. Vela sat very still. Outside the display, Aldrich Point was close enough now that she could see the individual lights of its docking structures. She had grown up in the politics of the Sorvathi court. She had navigated them since she was old enough to understand that the room she stood in was never really about what was being said in it. She knew how power moved in her father's house, who had it and who wanted it, who smiled in the morning and sharpened their intentions by evening. She had always believed she understood the edges of it. She had not known about this edge. "Who?" she said. "We don't know yet," he said. "That's part of what Aldrich Point is about. The diplomatic personnel there include people who specialize in exactly this kind of internal political reconstruction." She absorbed that. She thought about the 3 weeks she had spent in the detention cell on Station 12, which she had believed was a planned political stay, monitored and controlled by her father's office, safe in the way that calculated risk is safe. She had brought books. She had maintained her exercise routine. She had assumed she was inconvenienced, not endangered. The floor of that assumption had just dropped out from under her. Cole brought the ship into Aldrich Point's docking approach with the same seamless efficiency he did everything else. She watched him work the controls and thought about the word he had used: concern. Someone had a concern serious enough to pull a wheat farmer from Colorado. "How many people know?" she said. "About the secondary mission, 4. 5 now. She was the 5th. She understood what that meant. You told me. You needed to know. 3 years of court politics, 17 diplomatic languages, a lifetime of understanding that information was power and power was survival, and this human man had decided without being asked that she needed to know something dangerous because it was true, not because it served a strategy, not because it created an obligation, because she needed to know. She was quiet for a long moment. "Thank you," she said. It came out without the diplomatic casing she usually put around gratitude, without the careful placement that turned thank you into a move on a board. It came out plain. He nodded once without looking at her. The docking clamps engaged with a low, solid thunk and the ship stilled. On the other side of the airlock, she could hear movement, voices, the particular organized chaos of people who had been waiting and now had somewhere to direct their waiting. "What happens to you," she said, "after you hand me off?" "Debrief, probably 2 days, then home." "Back to Colorado." "Back to Colorado." She looked at the back of his head again, the scar from his ear to his neck, the tattoo on his right hand that she still could not read. She thought about 12 acres of wheat somewhere in a state she had only seen in satellite imagery, a flat landscape that humans apparently found beautiful, green and gold and ordinary. Cole. He turned. For the second time she had his full attention, and it was a different kind of full attention than she was used to. Most people looked at her and saw the title, the house, the position. He looked at her and saw whatever was actually there, which she found simultaneously comfortable and completely unnerving. "If you ever wanted to visit Sorvath," she said, "I would be in a position to arrange something considerably more comfortable than a ventilation tunnel." Something moved in his face again, that not quite smile. "I'll keep it in mind," he said. The airlock opened. And Vela, princess of the 3rd house, daughter of Emperor Drave, walked into Aldrich Point carrying more questions than she had come in with, and the strange, rootless sense that she had just met someone she would spend a very long time thinking about. The debrief room at Aldrich Point was small and white, and had terrible coffee, which Cole drank anyway because he had learned long ago not to be particular about things that did not matter. Across the table from him sat Director Lena Prout, who ran the human intelligence operation in this sector, and had done so for 11 years. She was a compact woman in her 50s with silver hair she kept short, and eyes that processed information the way a camera processed light, quickly and without judgment about what it found. She had 3 files open on the surface in front of her, and she was looking at him the way she always looked at him during debriefs, like she was reading a document she had mostly memorized but was checking for updates. "Walk me through the doc extraction," she said. He walked her through it. She asked clarifying questions at precise intervals, each one targeting a specific detail: the gap in the cruiser's gun arc, the security guard's patrol blind spot, the tunnel junction. He answered each one as exactly as he could, because Lena Prout's debriefs were useful only if you were accurate, and they were useful because she took accurate information and did important things with it. When he finished, she closed 2 of the files and left one open. "You told her about the secondary mission," she said. "Yes. I would have preferred you hadn't." "I know. I would also like to understand why you did." Cole wrapped both hands around the coffee. She thought her father's plan was under control. She thought the detention was a safe political move. If someone in the inner circle is working against her and she walks back into that court thinking everything is managed, she becomes a target who doesn't know she's a target. Lena was quiet. "She's smart enough to protect herself if she knows what she's protecting against," he said. "She's not smart enough to protect against something she doesn't know exists." That is a significant amount of confidence in someone you spent 7 hours with. 6.5, he said. "And yes." Lena looked at the open file for a long moment. The Sorvathi Intelligence Service has a name for the individual they believe is behind the extended detention order, We received a partial confirmation this morning from the source inside the diplomatic corps. She paused. It is someone Vela knows personally, someone she trusts. Cole said nothing. A member of her own advisory staff. A man named Counselor Drav, no relation to the Emperor, who has been building relationships with a faction that opposes the Kel Sector Accord. The Accord benefits Vela's house specifically, and Drav's faction wants it to fail. They believed a prolonged political crisis around her capture would erode the Emperor's willingness to pursue the deal. How prolonged? Cole said. Lena's expression told him the answer before she said it. Permanent, she said. They were going to make sure she never came home from that station. The words settled into the room. Cole did not move. He thought about the woman who had watched him clear a guard and said thank you with no decoration on it. He thought about the way she had read the mission briefing with complete attention, absorbing it the way someone absorbs information they have always known how to use. He thought about her telling him that she had not wanted to go back, and the honesty in it, the kind of honesty that costs something. She needs to know about Drav, he said. The diplomatic team will manage the disclosure. When? Lena looked at him steadily. Cole. When, he said again. She closed the last file. Cole, you are a contract asset. You retrieved the target. Your role in this is complete. When will they tell her? The silence in the room was of a particular quality. He had known Lena Prute for 9 years. He had run 11 contracts for her division. He knew when she was deciding something and when she had already decided. 48 hours, she said finally. After the initial diplomatic processing, they want her stable before they give her the specifics. Is she going to be with people she trusts for those 48 hours? She'll be with our diplomatic personnel. They're good people, professional. She doesn't know them. Cole. He drank the coffee and looked at the wall. The wall was white and had nothing on it. She is not your responsibility, Lena said, not unkindly. No, he agreed. But he sat there for a moment longer, holding the cup, thinking about a woman who had spent 3 weeks in a cell she thought was a planned stop, and had not known that the person she trusted most in her professional life had intended it to be her last address. He thought about 12 acres in Colorado. He thought about the way wheat moved in a wind from the north, which was the best kind of wind for it, steady and not too warm, and how he had stood at the edge of his north field 17 months ago and felt something close to peace for the first time in a long while. Then he put the cup down, looked at Lena and said, I want to be in the building for the disclosure. Lena looked at him for a long moment. That is not standard procedure. I know. Another long moment. She picked up her tablet, made a notation and set it down again. You'll be in the corridor, she said, not the room. Understood. He stood up. His back ached in the way it always did after a tight extraction, a particular tension along the left shoulder that was the permanent memory of an injury 6 years old, and he worked it out with one slow roll before he walked to the door. Cole, Lena said. He stopped. The file on you that I keep, she said, has a section I have updated 14 times in 11 years. It is the section about why you keep saying yes when we call. She paused. I think I understand it a little better now. He did not answer that. He opened the door and walked into the corridor, where the station's lights were steady and even, and somewhere further in the building, a Sorvathi princess was sitting in a room full of strangers, not knowing yet how close she had come to the edge of something permanent. He found a chair in the corridor and sat down, stretched his legs out and waited. The coffee had been bad. The chair was not comfortable. The corridor was quiet. He was good at waiting. He had always been good at waiting. It was perhaps the only skill he had that had not come from somewhere dark. Time moved, the station hummed. And Cole Hargrove sat in the corridor outside the room where Vela's world was about to be redrawn. And he was there when the door opened, and he was there when she came out with her composure intact, and her eyes carrying the particular expression of someone who has just confirmed something they had not let themselves suspect. She saw him, she stopped. "You knew," she said, "about Drav before the debrief." "I knew there was someone, not who." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she crossed the corridor and sat in the chair beside his, which was not a Sorvathi thing to do, he thought, a princess sitting in a corridor chair beside a contract soldier. But she did it with the same certainty she had brought to the ventilation tunnel, the dock, the ship, as though the choice was made before she made it. "He came to my naming ceremony when I was 9 years old," she said. "He gave me a book, Old Sorvathi History, the First Empire. He said knowledge of where we came from was the most valuable thing a person could carry." Cole said nothing. "I read it 4 times, she said. The corridor was quiet. The station hummed its steady note. "I would like," Vela said, with the precision of someone assembling words very carefully, "to return the favor of honesty." He looked at her. "I was not merely a political pawn in my father's strategy," she said. "I was also building something of my own. The Kell Accord is not just favorable to my house. I have been working privately for 2 years to ensure that the mining rights negotiation includes a cooperative technology clause. If humans and Sorvathi develop the sector jointly, the yield projections suggest it would benefit both economies at a level that makes future conflicts less viable as political tools." She met his eyes. "I am telling you this because you told me something true when you did not have to, and because the people in that room are going to tell my father, and I want at least one person outside that room to know that I am not only a princess. I am someone who has been trying to build something." Cole held that for a moment. 12 acres in Colorado, joint development of a mineral sector. The distance between those two things and the thread connecting them was a long one, but he could see it. "Sounds like a good plan," he said. She made a sound that was, he realized, a laugh, small and brief and genuine. "You are a strange man, Cole Hargrove." "So I've been told." She looked at the wall across the corridor. He looked at it too. It was the same quality of wall as in the debrief room, white and plain, and he was beginning to think that whoever designed this station had very clear ideas about what walls were for. "When they let you go back to Colorado," she said, "will you go directly?" "Probably stop in Denver first, see my brother. He's got a kid now, just turned 2. She was quiet for a moment in a way that felt like she was storing that information. "What is the child's name?" "Me," he said, "short for something, my sister-in-law picked it." "Me," Vela repeated, in the careful way of someone learning a word in a language not their own. "That is a soft name." "She's a soft kid," he said, "happy, laughs at everything." The corridor was quiet for another moment. Then Vela said, "I have 3 nieces. My oldest brother's daughters, the youngest is 4. When I left for this assignment, she gave me a small stone from the garden outside the family residence. She said it would protect me." A pause. "I had to leave it in the cell when I left. I did not want to slow you down by asking to go back for it." "What kind of stone?" he said. "Blue-gray with a white stripe through the center, very common on Sorvath. They grow in the riverbeds." "I'll have someone check the cell manifest," he said. "Aldrich Point has a recovery protocol for personal effects from extraction sites. Might be able to get it back." She looked at him. The expression on her face was one he could not translate into a word, but it sat somewhere between surprised and something gentler. "Thank you," she said. Again, without decoration. He nodded. Outside, somewhere beyond the station's hull, the stars were cold and exact and had no opinion about anything. Inside, the corridor hummed, and 2 people who had nothing in common except 7 hours and a ventilation tunnel sat in chairs that were not comfortable and did not need to fill the quiet. He would go back to Colorado. She would go back to the Sorvathi court, carrying the knowledge of Drav and the weight of a plan that was bigger than the plan anyone knew about. They would both have work to do. But for now the corridor was enough, and the quiet was enough, and when Vela of the 3rd house finally stood up and walked back toward the diplomatic wing, She paused once, just once, and looked back at him. "The tattoo on your right hand," she said. "I could never read it in the dark. What does it say?" He held his hand up, 3 words across the knuckles, small and dark. "Still here," she read. He lowered his hand. She looked at it a moment longer. Then she turned and walked down the corridor, straight and unhurried, carrying herself the way she had carried herself through every corridor since the station dock. Like the ground beneath her was exactly where she had put it. Cole watched her go. Then he leaned back in the chair that was not comfortable, looked at the wall that was white and plain, and let out a slow breath. Still here. He always was. Somewhere in Colorado, 12 acres of wheat were waiting in a north wind. The kid named Me was probably asleep by now, soft and happy in the way that children are happy when the world has not yet shown them its harder edges. His brother would have the porch light on. Cole Hargrove closed his eyes in a corridor on a human station in the middle of space, and for a moment, in the deep quiet of it, let himself be tired in the way that people are tired when they have been carrying something heavy and have finally set it down gently enough that it did not break. He would sleep. He would debrief twice more, he expected, and sign forms and answer questions, and then he would get on a shuttle and go back to Denver and see Me and his brother and drink better coffee than what Aldrich Point had served him. And the Kell Accord, when it was signed, and he believed it would be signed because he had sat in a corridor with the woman who had been building it for 2 years, and he had learned to trust certain kinds of certainty, would include a technology clause that no one had thought to announce, that would not make the evening news cycles, that would simply begin to work in the background of 2 civilizations' economies like water working through stone. Quiet, patient, real. He thought that was probably enough. He thought that was probably the best way anything important ever happened. The station hummed. The stars turned outside in their ancient pattern. And Cole Hargrove, who had been called death by people who faced him and survived only long enough to tell someone else, sat in a chair in a corridor on Aldrich Point, with wheat to tend and a niece to visit, with 3 words on his knuckles and no need to explain them to anyone. Still here, as he always had been. As for a long time yet he would remain.